Hey guys, Kodo Crypto here with a Bitcoin video update. We've had a pretty intense 24 hours, and I know a lot of you are trying to make sense of what has been going on. This video, guys, is going to talk about exactly that. I'm going to break down what I'm seeing here on Bitcoin, on Ethereum, and on a number of alts, kind of in the context of the bigger picture as well. I did share a tweet yesterday, which we'll go over, that kind of brings forth kind of my primary outlook on the markets here, but we're going to go into a lot more depth here, looking at individual altcoins, looking at Bitcoin and Ethereum on their own, and try and make sense of what's been happening over the last 24 hours. So I'm going to start this video off, guys, with a small recording or a small clip of an interview that was uploaded 2 days ago from another YouTuber. I was interviewed regarding Bitcoin, and in that video I talked about basically the two primary directions or paths of price action that I expected Bitcoin to take. Again, this was uploaded 2 days ago. The only reason I'm sharing this is not to sort of say that I called it, or to say that check out how accurate I was. It's mainly just to show you guys that, putting aside the news and the narratives and the type of stuff you're hearing on the internet about why this drop occurred, putting all that aside, I want to kind of highlight that the move that we saw yesterday, while it did look pretty intense and while it was very aggressive, it was certainly within the realm of possibility. And what you'll see from this video, from this small clip, is that certainly in my eyes, one of the two most likely scenarios for PA to play out. So the point of this is basically to show you guys that irrespective of what you may be hearing about Bitcoin, because I'm hearing calls for a bear market or calls that this is the end of the bull market, you have to kind of put that aside and look at this from a pure price action perspective. And from that perspective, this was certainly a possibility. And of course, I've talked about this in prior YouTube video updates. But not only that, it is nothing that is going to shift the direction of where we're headed in the coming months. So my expectation of 100K plus and a final fifth wave that's been more aggressive than anything that we've seen hasn't changed. And there's no reason for it to change. And again, this video was made a few days ago when we were trading at around 69K. And even at that time, my opinion had not changed. So it doesn't change with the events of last night. And it should not change. And that's kind of the point of me sharing this with you. So we're going to start off with that clip. If you want to watch the full interview, a lot of juicy nuggets of information in that interview. You can check it out on YouTube. The YouTuber is called The Bearable Bull. It's his most recent uploaded video. And again, it's about an hour long. It's chock full of alpha. So if you're still learning the ropes on trading and learning how I approach the markets, watching this video will give you a lot of insight. After we take a look at this short clip, again, this video, the goal was to get it out as soon as possible. So I'm not going to my editor for this one. I'm going to upload it myself, which means the editing is not going to be great. But I think it'll be worth watching, because we're going to go over Ethereum. We're going to go over my primary thesis here. We're going to look at specific alts, of course, CRV, CVX, two of my top picks right now. We'll also look at some of the meme coins to kind of get an idea of what we should be looking at in the altcoin market in general. Guys, with that being said, I know it was a little bit of a long intro. I haven't had my morning coffee, so let's go ahead and just jump right into it. We're going to start with that clip. The audio on this, I'm speaking through a mic, and so I hope that it picks up the audio from this clip. If it doesn't, or if the audio doesn't sound very clear, go ahead and just look up this video. And we're going to start this clip at around 9 minutes and 15 seconds in. Again, it's going to be maybe a 30-second to 1 minute clip. As you can see from the comment, this makes so much sense. I've heard many analysts talk about support and resistance, but nobody who can describe this as well as credible in terms of buyer and seller psychology in such an understandable way. Again, if you're new to technical analysis and you're trying to understand why we mark off the levels that we mark off, why they're significant, why they're important, there's a lot that I shared in this video that explains exactly that. It's not going to be in this clip that I share with you. So if you like the clip and you want to learn more about why we identify these levels, go ahead and watch the full thing. With that being said, let's jump right into it. Again, if you can't hear the audio, jump to this video, go to around 9 minutes and 15 seconds, and you can watch the clip yourself. But let's go ahead and try and go for this.
A lot of reasons for why price should bounce off of the green zone. Now you can see here that we came very close to this green zone, but we narrowly missed it on the last move down, right? It was kind of front run by about $1,000. So a lot of people may think now that this is the bottom, okay? And what that means is, for people that are long on leverage or margin, who are basically borrowed money to buy Bitcoin, most likely they've placed their stop losses right here. Why? Because they think that was the bottom. We've had a very nice move to the upside. There's no way that we retrace this whole thing. We're headed higher. You know, little do they know that we have technically just made a lower high. And in the same way that we made a lower high here at 72K and then fully retrace that move, that's still technically possible to happen here. And what we also know, again, is that there's a significant amount of leverage buildup that has occurred off of these lows. A portion of those are going to be people that have leveraged long. Again, their stop losses are likely resting right below these wicks, which means that if price is able to be pushed back down below these wicks, you force these guys out of the market. You stop them out. That creates sell pressure. Where does it create sell pressure? Right into this area where you expect a lot of buyers to be. The buyers scoop up the Bitcoin as these guys get stopped out, and then we see the true reversal. So the area of interest right now is really this green zone that we previously front ran at around 50 to 53K. That's assuming that the bottom is not in, right? If the bottom is in, you can make a pretty good argument that this region right here at around 58K to 60K is going to act as support as well. So in my eyes, I see basically like two viable options here, assuming that we don't just continue up and break out as it is. And the first is that we may come down if we get a correction and find some support closer to this area around 59, 60K and go up. Or if things are a little bit more bearish, you might come down and actually tag that place that we previously front ran around 53K.
All right, guys, I hope you guys are able to catch that clip again. The audio may not have been the best, so go ahead and rewatch it if you need to. But again, the idea that I shared here in this clip that was recorded 2 days ago at 69K was that there were two of the most viable scenarios that I could see playing out. Again, one, finding support in the 58 to 60K region, and if that region was lost, taking the lows here at 53K into high time frame demand and then seeing a reversal after that. Again, the correction here at 70K, in my own last YouTube video, I talked about that as well, and I explained the rationale and logic as to why I thought that the two most viable scenarios at the bare minimum included a dip to 58 to 60K. So if you want to understand the logic behind why I was expecting a rejection at the highs here at 70K, go ahead and watch my last YouTube video where I explain that. In any case, guys, the point that I'm trying to make here is that irrespective of what we're hearing in the news or what we're seeing in the headlines yesterday, this sort of a move down to 53K or back below these lows is not something that is really that crazy to occur. Like, it was a very realistic scenario that we essentially planned for a few days in advance. Again, if you watch this interview, you were well aware of this being a possibility, and not just a possibility, but one of the two highest likely probabilities to occur in the coming days. And so hopefully you weren't caught off guard. If you were completely blindsided by that move that we just saw to the downside, again, perhaps watch my video updates more frequently. I talk about these things in advance, not after the fact. And sometimes they can give you a heads up for something that we may have seen like yesterday. So in any case, guys, that was the clip that I shared. And now let's jump into today's chart, take a look at the correction that we saw, kind of assess the situation, and go from there. So this is the chart today. And again, you can see here from that video that I just shared, this is the green zone that I had referred to in that video, this area of demand on the higher time frames. And you can see that if I go to the daily chart, you can see that we've wicked into that area, just front ran the next area of interest. And I talked about this in a previous video, so I won't go over it too much, but the second area of high time frame demand that I previously mentioned would be nice to see front run. We wicked into this one. We're now trading right back above it. Clearly buyer interest in the area where we'd expect it to be after taking these lows. So what I want to emphasize here is I posted a tweet yesterday before I went to bed that kind of talked about the key difference here between what the Bitcoin and the Ethereum chart and why it's significant, why it's important. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at that. This is the tweet that I shared, and we'll take a look at the chart as well. You can go ahead and read this description that kind of explains the chart below. And it's kind of like my higher time frame thesis. Again, I've talked about these things throughout the years, about the Ethereum Bitcoin pairing and how they should relate. And this kind of just further solidifies that. But let's take a look at this chart here, and this is kind of what's important. You'll notice here that we had our key swing low that we talked about here, right, in that little snippet that I just showed you. And I talked about how it's possible that we sweep these lows, liquidate a bunch of longers that thought that the bottom was in, and then actually see the real reversal to the upside. This is a key area of demand where you expect buyers to step in. And this is a secondary area of demand. This is actually a more significant area of demand that I thought we may front run, which thus far we have. We're trading We traded a couple $100 above that level. But the key is here that in our tweet here, I kind of showed that Ethereum, on the other hand, is looking a lot less strong than Bitcoin here. Bitcoin has wicked below this key swing low here at around 52K. And ideally, we see some high time frame closes above that level. Whereas with Ethereum, we not only went below the key swing lows, but we've gone significantly below. We've wicked through the area of high time frame demand, the one that on Bitcoin we haven't yet actually tagged. And on Ethereum, we actually wicked below it, and we're certainly going to have some high time frame closes below the key swing lows to the left. And so the idea is that Bitcoin here is showing significantly more strength than Ethereum on this correction. And I previously talked about how this was back at 25K, where we had another situation where once again Bitcoin held a higher low, Ethereum wicked below it, broke the low, broke this level of market structure, while Bitcoin held that low. And so again, we saw here more strength on Bitcoin than we were seeing on Ethereum. And this is at the time why I said that it's likely that this is a sign of things to come, a sign of Bitcoin's strength to come in the coming days and weeks, and Ethereum relative weakness. And I don't have the chart here, but if you fast forward a couple of weeks, you'll see that by the time Bitcoin had broken out and was trading at 36K, I think Ethereum had not yet even broken 2100. So clearly Bitcoin from this point moving forward, again, Bitcoin began that next impulsive move to the upside and started accelerating while Ethereum kind of lagged. And this is kind of foreshadowing when we see Bitcoin showing more strength than Ethereum. In this case, it was because Bitcoin held a key level of market structure while Ethereum broke it. That kind of was a sign of things to come in the weeks. And what followed this was, of course, Bitcoin's major leg from this low here at 24,780, ultimately to new highs and $70,000. It was a $35,000 move or so. Actually, that's a $50,000 move. But yeah, anyways, the point that I'm trying to make here is that we're seeing, again, likely a similar scenario where we're seeing relative strength in Bitcoin versus Ethereum, and that could very well be a sign of things to come. Okay, now this ties into the altcoins that I'm about to discuss later in this video, which is why it's so important. But again, I explained all that here. The implications are that Bitcoin's likely going to recover from this correction far more quickly than Ethereum. And for Bitcoin, this looks more like a liquidity sweep into high time frame demand, whereas for Ethereum, we have a breakdown taking these lows of this consolidation into the last leg up. So this is actually a break of these lows is a lower time frame break in market structure. On Bitcoin, the break in market structure is down here at 38K, as I've previously said. So this is still totally healthy in terms of a correction on Bitcoin, whereas for Ethereum, it's a little bit more damaging in terms of structure. And that's why I argue that moving on forward, as we move to the upside, Bitcoin hasn't broken any key levels of support that are now flipped to resistance, whereas Ethereum has broken a very key level of support, and this area is going to act as resistance. So as we move up, Bitcoin will probably begin to impulse to the upside for that leg to 100K plus, and Ethereum might struggle here in this red zone for a bit before following suit. And that delay in Ethereum moving with Bitcoin will likely send the Ethereum Bitcoin pairing down to 0.03, which is a level that I've marked off 2 years ago that we've been bleeding towards for now 2 years, and explained all of how this makes sense based on what we're seeing here. So going back to Bitcoin now, what we want to see, guys, is high time frame closes above 53.6K, this blue line, this key swing low. Now, of course, this is the daily chart, right? 4 hours and 57 minutes to the daily closes. A daily close above this level is fantastic. That's what we want to see. We front run this level, and we don't have, I can't say like with a high level of confidence that our bottom is in, because we don't quite have much confirmation yet, right? If you consider that our breakdown actually began like somewhere here, the acceleration of the downside, until we get back above that region, usually it's tough to say that, you know, our bottom may be in, or if we see an impulsive move to the upside, we have more confirmation. But what I will say is a daily close above this dotted blue line is the first significant good sign that our bottom may very well be in, and that we really may have front ran this high time frame area of demand and found support in this weekly area of demand that we're now bouncing off of. So Bitcoin, for all intents and purposes, looks quite good despite this aggressive sell-off. Something like Ethereum, on the other hand, doesn't look fantastic here. And this, I think, is kind of representative or alluding to what the rest of the alt market is going to be struggling with in the coming weeks as Bitcoin continues up. I've previously said that it's always a challenge for me as a trader and analyst to keep focus on Bitcoin when I know that we're in the midst of a parabolic advance, because it's so tempting to catch these altcoin moves that may be outsized. We know that at some point alts will outperform Bitcoin, and there's always this temptation to try and catch those moves. And up from the bottom at 15K, I've pretty much stuck to focusing on Bitcoin, because I know that Bitcoin initially leads and outperforms, and then eventually that attention shifts to alts, and then those outperform. And so it's always a struggle on when to shift positions from Bitcoin to altcoins. We'll talk about some altcoins now. Again, the idea here being that if we get a daily close above 63K or 53K to recap, and we see maybe an impulse or a nice base form here, then we could get our next impulse, and this could be the worst of the correction. Meanwhile, coins like Ethereum, other altcoins may struggle. With this in context and with this in mind, let us go ahead and take a look at some altcoins I want to kind of explain my outlook on the altcoin market here with Ethereum being so weak and Bitcoin, showing relative strength. So let's go ahead and take a look at CRV and CVX first, and then we'll take a look at some other altcoins. These are two of my top picks right now, and of course I've explained why that's the case. So we had a period before this major drop where CRV was outperforming Bitcoin, and it looked like we maybe have been getting ready for a bigger breakout. And of course, with this recent drop, that has been that has changed a little. I want to discuss that here. So we'll start with CRV. We're going to take a look at the USD pairings and the Bitcoin pairings because they're both significant here. But for CRV, with the most recent drop, we have made new lows. Okay, and previously I've marked off this range that some of you may recall, and was looking for a move to the range highs for a period of relative outperformance against Bitcoin. Okay. You can see a very key swing high here, a very key swing low. So I was viewing this as a range. This very well may just be a deviation below the range lows, especially if the bottom isn't on Bitcoin. But again, when these coins are moving to the upside, they may outperform Bitcoin. When they're moving down, they may underperform Bitcoin. And so the idea was that if we were in this range and we were getting ready to move to the range highs, then likely into this resistance zone at 62 cents or so, then we likely see a period of relative outperformance on CRV, which is why I was so bullish on it before this drop. And I'm still very bullish on it, make no mistake, but I want to talk about context here. CRV Bitcoin also was printing high time frame bullish divergences. Here's the 3-day chart. You can see RSI making higher lows, price making lower lows, lower lows. That is a bullish divergence. That means that selling momentum is waning as price is making lower lows. The sell pressure is dwindling, and so then that indicates that we may be seeing a reversal soon. Again, just like on the USD pairing, we have a nice range here on the Bitcoin pairing. And so once again, you can either take these highs here as the local range highs, but these are the range lows. And so once again, I was looking for a move to these range highs, which off the levels that we were at yesterday before the drop would have been a 70 to 80% move to the upside against Bitcoin, meaning outperforming Bitcoin. Now, with the most recent price action, with the most recent developments, it looks like we may be breaking down. And if that is the case, then we may go for these range lows first, okay? And if we go for these range lows, again, two things can happen here. One is that we go and take these lows on the Bitcoin pairing, okay, which means that CRV continues to underperform Bitcoin down to these lows. And then this could be a deviation where we then see a move back up to the range highs, okay? Or the alternate option, depending on this is all dependent on how soon Bitcoin breaks out. The alternate option is that we break down below this range, and instead of reclaiming it and going for the highs, we continue to bleed, okay? Now, which of these two scenarios is going to happen? I don't know, but I'll tell you what it's based on. It's based on how quickly Bitcoin recovers, right? So if Bitcoin, as I just shared with you guys, if Bitcoin does this, right, and pops back up above these lows, forms a nice base over the next couple of weeks, then it's more likely that we see this scenario where altcoins are initially bleeding as Bitcoin pops back up, and then as Bitcoin consolidates for a couple of weeks, we may see some outperformance in alts, and we may catch this sort of a move here on CRV. And this is, again, relative outperformance of CRV against Bitcoin to the tune of around 100%, meaning CRV could double in the time that Bitcoin chops and consolidates, getting ready for the next leg. However, if we see a scenario in which Bitcoin simply reverses and we get a V reversal off of this level and we climb to new highs almost instantly in an impulsive manner, meaning take this green impulse that I have here and shift it to where we are now, if we get an immediate impulse and continuation in the fifth wave, then it's more likely that we see something like this, where coins like CRV and altcoins don't get a chance, don't get a window of outperformance, and instead just continue to bleed against Bitcoin as Bitcoin pumps up to 100K plus. Now, keep in mind, this is the CRV Bitcoin chart. So this doesn't mean that the CRV USD chart is bleeding as well. CRV USD hit 18 cents. This sort of a scenario, I'm going to make this the red scenario, in which CRV Bitcoin is bleeding, doesn't mean that we're falling from 18 cents to 16 cents to 14 cents to 12 cents. It just means that CRV is not gaining as much ground as Bitcoin. Why? Because Bitcoin is, in that scenario, pumping very aggressively now from this dip to 100K plus. But this scenario is ideal, and this is what I hope for. Prior to this drop that we just saw, prior to the strength that I'm now seeing on Bitcoin versus Ethereum, my intention was, at the very least, to hold my CRV trade for a minimum 60, right, or 40 to 50 to 80 to 100% gain, and then shift that position into Bitcoin. Okay, that was the plan. Let me catch this window of outperformance on CRV and CVX, and then let me take the profits and shift to an even larger position on Bitcoin to catch that wave to 100K plus. That was the plan, right? Or the plan may have been, let me catch this move and let me hold for, the old eventual outperformance on CRV. But at the bare minimum, I was looking to play this range here on CRV Bitcoin. Again, the similar range could have been seen on CRV USD right here. And again, we could have longed here and taken profits at 36 cents, which would have been a 50% gain. Or if we go for these highs, that would have been a 100% gain into resistance, where I would then have taken profits on my CRV long position, the trade only, again, spot I'm holding throughout, but take positions on the CRV long trade at this resistance zone, shift to Bitcoin, because at that point we probably see a pullback, okay, or another lower high, okay, into this resistance, and some consolidation before CRV really runs, okay. And again, that's just because Bitcoin would be impulsing and attention would be shifting to Bitcoin. And so we'd get, again, as I've shown here, another lower high on CRV. Then we put in a higher low on CRV, and then CRV absolutely sends, okay? So the plan was, up until last night, to play these bounces on these altcoins into resistance, shift that position to Bitcoin, and then ride Bitcoin up to 100K plus, then shift back to these alts to catch the mega moves on alts. With the recent developments, now that's put a little bit of a wrench in my play, because now we have a potential breakdown. And I don't know yet, again, based on how Bitcoin reacts here, I don't know if we are simply going to see some temporary weakness against Bitcoin in the short term and then get a deviation below these lows and then a full-on reversal that's very aggressive. In this scenario, you want to be in a trade on CRV instead of Bitcoin, because this means Bitcoin's probably chopping while CRV is pumping up 100%. Again, I don't know if we're going to get that, or I don't know if we're going to get this bleed, because Bitcoin doesn't actually give us a chance to rotate. Bitcoin just simply reverses out of this correction into that parabolic advance. And either scenario is viable, and that's the tough part, where do we continue to look for trades on something like CRV, where we have, bullish divergences forming, a potential range of deviation, or do we look to shift focus back to Bitcoin, where we know that an impulse is kind of imminent, right? Depending on how long we consolidate, and a move to 100K plus that sucks life out of alts for a period of time occurs. And so these are the type of mental games that you have to, constantly be thinking about in terms of positioning at a time like this, where you know that a Bitcoin impulse that's going to suck liquidity out of alts is an inevitability, but within that time, before it happens, do we get a chance to play 100% bounce on CRV, right? That's the big question. And again, I'm a professional trader, so I do this for a living. If you're not a professional trader, these moves are hard to nail, okay? They're hard for me to nail. So someone who doesn't do this for a living, they'd be even more difficult. So don't necessarily, this is more for educational purpose for a lot of you, because you don't even want to try messing with this stuff. A lot of you are better off just holding your spot positions. But for those that are trying to learn and actively trade, these are the types of things that you want to be thinking about. Again, I can zoom out a little bit here on CRV Bitcoin, and you can take this entire cluster that preceded this breakdown, right? This meltdown. This is a massive area of supply, okay? And so in a perfect world, right? In a perfect world, you get to play a bounce into this supply and then take profits and then ride Bitcoin. And then we see this CRV Bitcoin pairing bleed and make new lows as Bitcoin's running parabolically. And then you can buy CRV Bitcoin back here at the lows. This is the perfect scenario. We just don't know if we're going to get that chance or not. And that's a decision that everyone has to make if they want to attempt to try and play this or not. Again, I've been saying I've been very bullish on CRV and CVX against Bitcoin for this reason, because up until yesterday, we had those nice bullish divergences forming, which told me that it was likely that we see something like this. And that's a 100% move against Bitcoin in a very short period of time. Now, I want to show you guys on the 3-day chart, we haven't made a lower low yet on RSI. So technically, these bullish divergences that are building up are still valid, okay? And that's where this gets tricky, because obviously on this drop that we saw over the last 24 hours, CRV performed a lot worse than Bitcoin, right? This pairing bled to the downside. So once again, you're thinking, well, it's bleeding, it's weak. But on the higher time frames, the high time frame divergences that we had are not yet invalidated. So it's possible that we recover from this, or ideally that we sweep the lows like I shared here, and then reverse, right? And then get that outperformance as depicted here. So I know that CRV has shown some weakness on this drop. A lot of alts have, but that doesn't necessarily mean that much has changed in terms of my bullishness on CRV or CVX, because it doesn't rule out a scenario like this happening, right? I also want to kind of show you guys that on the weekly, this is actually setting up for our first weekly bullish divergence, right? We never had a bullish divergence on the weekly, but assuming that our weekly closes a little bit lower, right, we will probably get a bullish divergence on the weekly with RSI making a higher low and price making a lower low, right? Again, assuming that we close a little bit lower, because if we close the weekly where we are now, we've made a higher low, but the weekly closes in 6 days. So in 6 days, if we close a little bit lower, let's say we take these lows, then we bounce up a little bit, we get a lower low on price, but a higher low on RSI. That is setting up for, again, a reversal and makes this type of scenario, again, very likely. So don't count out CRV just yet, because it's shown some weakness on the last 24 hours. A lot of alts have. That doesn't mean that fundamentally anything has changed, or that all of a sudden the whole idea of it being more bullish is gonna magically evaporate. It's still very much intact. And this, the reason I'm talking so much about CRV here is because it applies to all alts. You have to think about them against their Bitcoin pairings. It applies to them all here. Everything got hit yesterday with the drop. Most alts fell a lot more than Bitcoin did, just like CRV did. That's not necessarily a sign of extreme weakness on these if they're printing these higher time frame bullish divergences, and if they're potentially trading in a range here where we have a very likely play of a sweep of the lows and then a reversion of the highs. These are all things that we have to keep in mind. CVX is in a similar position as CRV. Let's take a quick look at CVX. Okay, now CVX on the USD pairing a little bit different, and this one CVX hasn't yet taken its lows at 180. We did rip through the ideal buy zone, obviously. And I said in a tweet as well a couple of days ago that the bullishness on CRV and CVX can only be expected if Bitcoin is to hold ground, right? I shared this tweet 2 days ago actually, and basically said that with the strength on CRV and CVX, it's important to know your continuation is reversible as it depends on Bitcoin and the broader market finding some ground here. This was when Bitcoin was trading at I think around 53K, a little 53, a little bit higher, 56K, maybe 58K, something like that. If Bitcoin and Ethereum nuke here, nothing will be immune in the immediate short term. If Bitcoin catches a bid and we keep ranging, that's when the below will shine. So basically, not sure if you're playing CRV, CVX, you are managing risk. Make sure if you are, you're managing risk, setting stops, and not going crazy in the leverage in case we see a nuke here led by Bitcoin. If you're playing the above with spot, you don't have to worry about the dip if it comes. It will be temporary. And this, again, is the point that I'm trying to make, is that the drops that we're seeing are not, people ask me, has this changed your thoughts on CRV? Has this changed your outlook on CVX? No, right? Clearly, we ripped through this, and that is a consequence of Bitcoin absolutely nuking. Like I said, if Bitcoin and Ethereum nuke, nothing's immune in the short term. But this doesn't change the high time frame bullishness that I have on these coins. It does mean, we've seen some short term weakness, and that may affect the short term, but nothing has changed on the higher time frames or the mid time frame. So keep that in mind here when we talk about these things. Now, CVX obviously has ripped through the ideal buy zone. That ideal buy zone should have held, but Bitcoin nuked and brought everything down with it. But it hasn't yet quite taken these lows at 184 or 182. I think it's still possible that we can take those lows. I don't think that they are necessarily need to be defended, right? CRV already took its lows. CVX holding above its lows, but I think that those lows can be taken. The chart is not really giving me much to work with here because we've lost the main area of support. We're approaching this area where, if you recall previously, we saw significant absorption here, at these lows, which is why we pushed back into the range. So what I'm looking for, of course, is data that shows me absorption, things like that. But again, whatever downside we get here, temporary, nothing to be concerned about. What's more important to me is what does a CVX Bitcoin chart look like? Because just like we identified on the CRV USD chart that we may see a little bit more drawdown, but we're seeing bullish divergences and we may see reversion after that. We want to see how CVX looks against Bitcoin, because that, again, will give us an idea of whether it makes sense to focus on CVX on this dip, again, or Bitcoin. So let's go ahead and take a look at the CVX Bitcoin chart. Okay, and this is CVX Bitcoin. And this is, again, why these charts are so important, because they give you a lot of insight that you're not going to get by looking at the USD pairing. You're not going to understand when the USD pairing is going to show a lot of strength or a lot of weakness unless you take a look at these charts. Then, based on what Bitcoin does, they'll show either relative strength or relative weakness depending on how the CVX Bitcoin chart looks. So if I take a look at this chart, this looks a lot healthier than the USD chart, right? You can see here that, unlike the USD chart, that ideal buy zone that's on the USD chart, which let's go ahead and actually pull them up side by side so you guys can see. We'll go CVX USD, or we'll go, here you go. Pulling them up side by side, you can see that that buy zone that we're seeing here on the Bitcoin pairing, that similar zone that we had here on the USD pairing that got melted through, it's actually holding on the Bitcoin pairing, okay? So this was the kind of equivalent level on the USD pairing. We'll make it orange as well. And we broke through that. But on the Bitcoin pairing, we're technically holding it, okay? And again, we have this range that I drew out. And again, the idea behind the CVX play was, that we have this range here, and we broke back inside the range after seeing absorption here. We tested the range lows, held them as support. So as long as the range lows hold, then we're likely headed to the range highs, which meant, a 70% move at the minimum to the upside, which meant, again, a relative outperformance against Bitcoin to the tune of 70+%, right? That is why the last few days have been so focused on CRV CVX, because the charts had a very nice setup until they got nuked by Bitcoin here in the last 24 hours. Now, the Bitcoin pairing still looks solid, okay? And this is why this is important, because if this zone is held in the Bitcoin pairing, okay, then it's very possible that we do see a bottom here, and then we start climbing back up to the range highs. And if that's the case, then this recovery on CVX may actually be even more aggressive than the recovery on Bitcoin for now, and we may see something like this, okay? So relative weakness on the drop as the Bitcoin pairing falls. If the Bitcoin pairing finds support and rises, we'll see relative strength against Bitcoin. Also, you'll notice that we have an even more significant kind of higher time frame level in the green here that I was watching, okay? That's the level here at this low that we deviated below and then saw the big move to the upside from. We haven't yet retested that, okay? So first level of support, obviously orange, but if Bitcoin is very bullish and is showing a lot of aggression and pumping to the upside, then potentially green. And again, if Bitcoin simply goes from where we are now and starts impulsing directly with no consolidation, then just like CRV, we probably come down to new lows against the Bitcoin pairing, okay? So a lot of possibilities here, and we won't know which one's going to play out until we see how Bitcoin behaves on this recovery, right? But again, assuming that Bitcoin breaks back up from this dip and then consolidates a bit, the odds that we get one of these upper two scenarios is more likely. Again, the third scenario where we completely melt against Bitcoin really only comes into play on a Bitcoin recovery that's extremely aggressive, and that doesn't give any time for consolidation or any time for anyone to really get in off of this correction. Kind of an immediate reversal of the upside that just shoots and recovers as fast as it fell, leaving a lot of people sidelined. That's when this scenario comes in, where all Bitcoin pairings in general across the board just kind of bleed. But again, my hope is that we get a chance to play this bounce, or we get a chance to rotate. Again, if I'm a trader, then I'm looking at a chance to rotate a move up on a relative window of relative outperformance on CVX against Bitcoin, up to the red zone, right? Make another lower high, just as we had here, 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 and then potentially just as we might have there. Rotate into Bitcoin after 100% gain on CVX, and then ride Bitcoin as the Bitcoin pairing bleeds, again, possibly to new lows as Bitcoin's going parabolic, and then jumping back into the alts for the real rally after Bitcoin, hits 100K plus and potentially pauses for a breather there. So this, again, is kind of to emphasize the outlook on a lot of alts here, because this is not just CRV and CVX, but any alts that are showing potential strength against Bitcoin, that have potential setups where we may get windows of outperformance, it's worth paying attention to here. Everything else that doesn't look like this that doesn't have high time frame bullish divergences, that isn't sitting on an area of support after breaking lower time frame market structure, that's simply bleeding and it's already in this kind of negative price discovery against Bitcoin. Anything that looks like that, you don't want to even bother with. You want to focus on Bitcoin. Something that looks like this, where there's a chance that we get relative outperformance, you want to keep an eye on it, right? Again, for me as a trader, I want to keep an eye on it because I can try and get that rotation. If you're not a trader, you want to keep an eye on it because you may be trying to accumulate spot. For those that are bleeding against Bitcoin, you might get a better chance to accumulate spot at a cheaper price against US dollars. For those that are looking strong against Bitcoin, they may recover a lot faster and not give you a very long lasting buy the dip opportunity. That's why this is important to watch. Let's take a look at some other altcoins, right? That I think are maybe notably weaker or have more room to fall. We'll start with meme coins specifically. Look bad. And I've said this for months now that I expected meme coins to see rotation out of them, so it's not surprising to me. But we'll take a look at meme coins. We'll also take a look at HBAR, one of my other top picks. And actually, in the interview that I just showed you guys at the beginning of this video, I talked about this zone here in the green. I'm going to change it to orange as a logical test of this zone, which we're now getting. So again, I talked about why it makes sense to be a buyer here. I won't cover that. Go watch the video, the YouTube video from the Bearable Bull if you want an update on HBAR there. But let's take a look at HBAR Bitcoin because this is kind of the other situation that alts may be in that's relatable. Here's HBAR Bitcoin, and you can see here that we have this very key swing low here from months ago, from years ago. And unlike CRV Bitcoin, unlike CVX Bitcoin that have formed these bullish divergences here on their Bitcoin pairings, you can see here on the 3-day, we don't have any bullish divergence on HBAR Bitcoin. On the weekly, we don't have any bullish divergence on HBAR Bitcoin. And on looking at the chart in and of itself, we're now pushing the lows, okay? So HBAR Bitcoin is in a scenario where what this tells me is that we're probably going to break down from these lows and bleed a little bit. Ultimately, we're going to break back above, we're going to reclaim, and we're going to absolutely send it. But in the immediate short term, HBAR is one coin that I don't expect to see particular strength against Bitcoin for, again, in the immediate short term. And make no mistake, this doesn't mean that HBAR is a bad coin or that it's extremely weak. 99% of alts are going to be in the situation where they're not going to show any strength against Bitcoin. Even CRV and CVX that I think may show some initial strength, remember, for those I'm even expecting them to pop up potentially and then ultimately bleed back down. So nothing is immune to Bitcoin pumping like mad. That is going to suck liquidity out from everything. But some coins may see some relief before that against Bitcoin and some may not. So with HBAR, again, while I think that it makes sense to be a buyer here at the US dollar valuation that we're at, again, that was the orange zone. And again, I talked about this 3 days ago. I'm not saying that this isn't a hindsight thing. I said literally that this is the area where you want to be buying. In that interview 3 days ago, you can watch it if you'd like. While I think the downside is probably limited in US dollar terms, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to see an immediate reversal to the upside. And based on the HBAR Bitcoin pairing, that adds more confidence to that idea, that HBAR may not see a reversal back to the upside that's as strong or as aggressive as what Bitcoin's going to see. So Bitcoin may outperform for some time, okay? So your alts are either going to be in one of two baskets, looking like this, or worse, already bleeding against the Bitcoin pairing at new lows, but looking like this where they don't look so great against Bitcoin, and then looking like the ones on CRV and CVX where the Bitcoin pairings look like they may actually see some strength yet in the coming days, or may see some relief before Bitcoin absolutely steals the show. Now we'll move on to some meme coins, guys, and I'm going to pull up another one of my tweets for this. And this tweet is, again, this is about all memes in general, and I tweeted this back in May 4th. This was when I basically said I think we're headed for a meme apocalypse. I made a video on it talking about how I think memes are going to get wiped out from these levels. Got a lot of hate when I posted this, got a lot of people upset, but I was just calling it how I see it. And actually in that tweet, if you scroll down, someone asked me, right here, forgot to ask Cred, what factors, if you can share, made you think that meme wipeout would be worse than what you initially thought, right? Just want to learn what really caught your attention. I said I looked at the full price history of the BONK chart. Okay, I said that on May 4th. And what I was referring to is this right here, which I've now shared a couple of charts on. What I shared here is what prompted me to make this post when I did was actually the BONK chart itself. You can see the TradingView chart versus the DEX Tools chart below. Most are only looking at the former, this one right here, and haven't actually seen the latter, this one right here, and don't realize how much empty air we have below us. When BONK breaks down from this current consolidation, which I've maintained as high time frame distribution since May 4th, which was back here at these relative highs, it's going to be nasty. Okay, I think we will see 60 to 70% more downside from current levels at the minimum. Would you be prepared for something like this? So a lot of altcoins, a lot of meme coins look like this, where you have these massive, massive rises that no one seems to realize have occurred because they're looking at the trading view chart, which only actually shows this consolidation at the highs and not everything that preceded it. And they're thinking that we can't go much lower. These are the lows. We're already halfway there. We're bullish. We're headed up. And then you zoom out and you look at the full price history and you see that, wow, this is a massive inefficiency. We're going to retrace, in my opinion, a good chunk of this. Just to get back down to this consolidation cluster here, that's a 70% move to the downside. It will possibly be worse. And this applies not just to BONK, but it applies to coins like WIF, where once again, you have people looking at this, and back at 240, I said we're probably heading back down to 147. And of course, we got that. Now we're currently trading at 120, if I'm not mistaken. But WIF looks exactly the same, where you have this massive run up, a completed 5-wave cycle. And this is, in my opinion, high time frame distribution. I've been saying that since WIF was at $4 and some change, and got the most hate for it when I shorted WIF up here as well. People saying that I don't know what I'm talking about, and we're currently down a 60-70% from there. And my point was that we could go significantly lower, right? Because we have so much open air below us. This correction, while it seems big, this is really just the top of the distribution happening here. After distribution, after this completes, we get markdown. Markdown phase hasn't really started yet because markdown occurs when we break down from the distribution range. You can consider this entire thing a higher time frame distribution range, and we haven't yet fully broken down from it and accelerated to the downside, but that will happen typically. And so the actual aggression to the downside probably yet hasn't even really begun, and we're trading at now $1.20, $1.60 when I tweeted this. But the point is that unlike coins like CRV Bitcoin, where we see potential for some relief, right, and then continued bleed, unlike coins like CRV USD, where downside is probably limited, right? Especially if we see that relief to the upside to here and then put in a higher low, which is what I'm expecting. Coins like these meme coins that we've been running for 6 to 12 months are not in the same boat. They're not in the same situation, right? They've not barely run for the last 6 months. They've been pumping like mad. And because of that, they have a lot of potential downside yet to go. Whereas coins like CRV and CVX and other coins that have already been beaten to the ground, beaten to a pulp, are likely to see some sort of a rotation where they start to rise and form a bigger base as profits rotate out of meme coins, where people have made thousands of X's, and go into fundamentally solid coins where they can make another 100X, not 1000X. They're not going to make 1000X in my opinion, but another 100X or another 50X or another 30X, right? You're not going to get that on a meme coin that is distributing at all-time highs after 12 months of nonstop upwards price action. So when people ask me, you're bearish on this altcoin, does that mean you're expecting the same sort of drawdown on CRV or CVX or HBAR, et cetera, et cetera? No, I'm not. And hopefully this makes it clear why I say that, right? But you want to look at the CRV Bitcoin, you want to look at the alt Bitcoin pairings as well to get more insight into this for any alt that you're curious about in terms of relative strength and where it could be headed. All right, guys. So with that being said, I got a phone call, so I kind of lost my train of thought, but I think I pretty much covered what the way I'm approaching this in terms of altcoins and Bitcoin. With that being said, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at some of our data here on Velo Data that kind of supports the idea that the worst is probably over here. I know this was ugly. I know this was a nasty drop, but I think that the worst is probably over. Again, I've talked about what we're looking for, that daily close above this key swing low here, and if we can see some lower time frame signs of a reversal, I kind of depicted here what would be a perfect scenario. That is, the time is not drawn to scale, so I'm not saying that this should go on until September, but basically, in a perfect world, some sort of a consolidation here underneath 63 to 68K. This little window of consolidation would be what we need on coins like CRV and CVX to get those short bursts of outperformance to their local resistances, and then an impulse on Bitcoin. This is ideal, again, because it gives us some time here, consolidation on Bitcoin, to build positions, to maybe play some of those spikes on some of those positive looking altcoins before the rally up. This may be wishful thinking because, again, I would love this, but maybe we simply don't get this and we instead reverse more aggressively with an impulse off of these lows and rip through the red zone. That means that we wouldn't really get a chance to play rotations on alts, and Bitcoin would probably start running up aggressively, leaving many people sidelined. So both are possible. Again, one is what I want to see happen. One is what what would be the most aggressive reversal, and both are viable. So we'll have to see how PA develops to get a better idea. But let's go ahead and take a look at Velo Data. Again, let's talk about our data here that we always look at to kind of further analyze this drop that we've recently had. Oh, wow, it's looking even better than it did last night. Okay, good stuff. All right, so point here that I really want to emphasize, there's really one main takeaway here, and it's a good one. Open interest has been almost completely, fully reset. And that is the most bullish thing. If I had to point to one thing that would tell me that this drop is likely, the worst of it's likely done, it's this. That open interest is now almost fully reset off of the highs, meaning leverage players have been completely nuked on this drop. Where did we drop into? Right into high time frame demand. Okay, front running the zone that I mentioned earlier, that I said it would make sense to front run. And with that drop into high time frame demand, we've liquidated a bunch of late longs. Again, as I described in the video, probably had their stop losses here. In fact, you can actually see this liquidation candle. Let's go down to the hourly. Where do these massive liquidations start? Let's go ahead and mark it off. Okay. Massive liquidation started right here on this candle. Biggest liquidation candle right here. Okay. What was that? That was the candle that brought us below the key lows where I specifically said you probably have a lot of stops resting. This is proof of that. We know we had a lot of stops resting there because we had a massive liquidation of open interest, meaning positions are closed as soon as we breach these lows. So again, the theory and the ideas that I share in these videos, like the one that I shared with you guys at the beginning of this video, this is how you verify that's not just theory, that's actually what happens in practice. That's not just me wishfully thinking that there's stops resting below this low and we're gonna squeeze them out. This is proof of what I just said, literally shown by data that supports the idea. And that proves the idea that, yes, there were a bunch of stops resting below these lows, and yes, they have been forced to close, right? So we got a massive reset in open interest here, which is fantastic to see. We're holding high time frame demand. We'll probably get a close above this key swing low. Looking really good here. And this is all I need to see to be confident that the worst of the downside is probably done. Okay, this doesn't mean, as we always say, that anything can happen. These are just probabilities, and this is a high probability idea. It doesn't mean that it's impossible that we go lower. It doesn't mean that's impossible that we bleed a little bit more. But this is the type of stuff that we want to see to give us confidence that the worst is probably over. So with that, guys, I'm going to end this video. I think I've covered a good bit of stuff here, and I apologize if it wasn't as concise and straightforward as it normally was. I was in a rush to get this out as soon as possible, and so a bunch of thoughts are running through my head, and I try to put it out all out as in the most simple and understandable way that I could. But if you guys enjoyed it, please like and share, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.